Good morning, Maine. Chuck Ellis here, and you are watching the Muddy Waters podcast. As you know, the Muddy's Water. Wow, if I can get these words out. It's early in the morning. I don't normally do these so early, and so I don't think my brain is fully functioning. But you are watching the Muddy Waters podcast, and we exist to help the people of Maine better understand what's going on here in the state of Maine, so that people can be informed and vote accordingly and get involved in politics the way that they should. Unfortunately, the mainstream media is not doing us any favors. They're reporting largely as a propaganda arm of the left. And so we're doing this to try and, combat them and help people, again, like I said, better understand what's actually going on. And one of the other things that they do, and so many of these other things do, is they want to hyper focus everybody on what's happening at the national level. When really the way that our country was structured is such that what's happening at the most local level should have the most significant impact on our lives. And in all reality, I think this is still the case. And so we try to focus on local politics, what's going on here in the state of Maine and in specific towns, and what's going on in the schools and all these other different things to help people better understand, again, what's going on in their world. So as part of that, I interviewed different people from around the state. And today we have with us Ben Tuttle. Ben, thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Good morning. And so yeah, as I was just saying, like we're trying to help the people of Maine better understand what's happening. And so, kind of as this process, I like to just start off by saying, like, who are you? Where do you come from? And what in the world has made you decide that you want to get involved in especially local politics, because that can get hot and heavy real quick.
It absolutely can, Chuck. And I'll my story is I was born in Germany. My dad was in the Air Force. My dad was actually the assistant adjutant general of the Maine Air National Guard here. Went to Portland High School, played football, settled out here in Gorham. I have agricultural roots tying back to the state of Vermont. Um, and grew up in Portland Bulldog through and through. Quick to say that I'm a Mainer through and through. So back early 2000s, had an opportunity to buy a piece of property out here in Gorham. Loved the agriculture, loved the farms, the rolling hills, very similar to Vermont out here. Um, and two beautiful kids that have gone through our Gorham school system. Um, Fast forward to 2020. I also coached football here in Gorham. Was the president of the Gorham Football Boosters. Got very involved with turning our program around. Very involved with funding the Gorham program. Gorham, actually, the Gorham football program helps and funds a good part of the high school program through our smaller Pee Wee leagues and fundraising, etc. And I said it, in the back of my mind when I was, working with the town, working with really became town politics. We had a new field, needed to find, working with the Parks and Rec, a new field for our middle school, what were known as the Grizzlies, and then the Junior Grizzlies program. So, motivating people, finding volunteers, fundraising. I always kind of had in my back, in the back of my mind that, football families, one, we know how to work. Two, we know what a team effort is like. And three, I always kind of wondered, not with an ulterior motive, but kind of knew that, hey, if I ever needed and had a political stance or issue here in the town of Gorham, that I could rely on those football families to kind of rally, pull up their bootstraps, and get down, to work and make things happen. So that was always back in the back of my mind. That's going back, I guess 15 years now. And then fast forward to 2020. um, the obviously stolen election. It's kind of funny my progression that I went through. You know, I knew full well that Donald Trump had won that election. The media spun it out of control. No evidence of election fraud. You know, on and on and on. And I was kind of like, this is outrageous. And the thing that really got me deep in my heart is when Twitter censored Donald Trump, the most powerful man on the face of the earth, you know, being the president of the United States. I knew in my heart of hearts that our First Amendment right was was in jeopardy. And I had a good friend of mine that who's been very involved with education up in Canada. He was a roommate of mine up at Bowdoin College. He could see on my via my Facebook post that I was losing my mind. I'm like, this something nefarious is going on. This is outrageous, and I'll never forget it. He got in touch with me. He said, "Benny, turn off the TV. Just turn it off. Here's where you want to start going. Here's these truth people, that I've been following, started, finding, videos, documentaries, and Chuck, I'll be honest with you, went down every rabbit hole you can possibly imagine, and some of the people that really rang true to me. One of them was Scott McKay of the Patriot Street Fighter, and listened to him kind of come onto the scene. Ended up following a number of his podcasts, people that he would have on that were very powerful guests. Again, speaking the truth. And fast forward to this morning, um, I heard it over and over and over again, like you were talking about the Constitution and the mainstream media, that people are saying you have to get involved. And what I tell people with passion and righteous indignation, that if you don't think Marxism and communism isn't knocking on your front door, you're sorely mistaken. And it's like Scott McKay says, come hell or high water, you're going to end up in this fight. To what extent, to how kinetic it gets, I don't know. But you've got to get in this fight. I admire what you're doing, getting the truth out, pulling from resources. What's scary, and I found this out yesterday, was the amount of monies coming from NGOs that are infiltrated into our education system here in Maine is it's baffling. Um, so another tidbit
Yeah.
I like to share with people, Chuck. I'm the only living human being on the face of the earth that actually brought a 52-ton right whale out of Portland Harbor to the town of Gorham. I was one of
Wow.
three. Yeah, I don't know if you heard about that. It was probably what, three
No.
or 4 years, 3 or 4 years ago. I was one. We called ourselves whale busters. Gentleman by the name of Eddie Benson and Paul Smith. Paul Smith had the logging truck. Eddie Benson owned K-Ben Farms. Both of them tragically have passed away in the last couple of years. Eddie was in my
Wow.
wedding party, but it was funny because Saturday afternoon at 1 o'clock, I get a phone call, and it's Eddie. He goes, Benny, what are you doing? I said, well, nothing, Eddie. What are you doing? He goes, you want to go get a whale with me in Portland? I'm like, sure. I'd love to go get a whale with you down in Portland. So he's one of the few. He's one of the only legal composting facility for mammals that wash up, whether it's seals or smaller whales. But we were the trio that brought the 52-ton right whale, an endangered species, back on a Saturday night at 1 o'clock, going down Commercial Street in Portland, when all the bars were just getting out. And I've got comedy and laughs about that whole night. It just I could tell the story, entertain an audience for half an hour. So, anyways, my roots are here in Gorham. Two wonderful kids. I'm sick of it. We've had basically a takeover here in the town where, again, out of seven town councilors, two of them are only the only two fiscally conservative people on the town council. And then we have um, an entire school committee that I call it, they live in the land of rainbows and unicorns. And I'm sure,
Ah,
Chuck, you and I wish that the world was unicorns and rainbows, and I hope we get
yeah.
there someday. I think things are certainly changing, but
I'm
it's a
not sure
tough world.
unicorns are ever coming. Rainbows I see occasionally. I've not yet seen a unicorn. And I don't think we're going to invent them. Well, we could maybe. Maybe
I,
we'll
I
invent the unicorn.
I call it the land of rainbows and unicorns. I think
Yeah.
you know where I'm coming from.
I
So
absolutely do. It's interesting. I actually made a comment on X recently, and I used that phrase. And I was thinking about it because we say the unicorns and rainbows, and I'm like, well, I don't know why we include rainbows because those actually exist. It's really more fairies and unicorns. I think would be a better a better way to say it,
I I,
because yeah, it's not
I
reality is what they're living in. What's interesting, you mentioned like we wish. Look, I wish that people were basically good, which is what they kind of, despite hating such a large portion of the population, they they claim to believe that everybody is basically good. That's kind of one of their tenets, right? Of everybody's basically good. That's why socialism is good, right? Socialism is good because we'll all work together. The problem is reality. The problem is that there is no situation in which socialism has ever worked. It's always devolved into some form of communism, and it's because it doesn't take into account the reality of human nature. Human nature is that I am selfish, like that's at its core, and I'm going to look out for my own best interest over and above everyone else's. There are occasionally people who are more righteous and more virtuous than others and will think of others first, but the general rule of thumb and the vast majority of people are going to look out for themselves first and foremost. So if you structure a society that's designed to work when people are looking out for everyone else equally to themselves, when the reality is that people are actually basically selfish, you like it's a recipe for disaster. And so yeah, it would be great if that was the world in which we lived and everybody would participate and work hard for the sake of everybody else. But it's just not the world in which we live, which is why, kind of as a juxtaposition to that, it's why capitalism works. Now, people will be angry at like capitalistic societies because of the fact that it incentivizes greed. And you know what? The reality is like that's not untrue, right? It does.
correct.
That's actually why the system works, is because of the fact that I want to make more for myself. I'm going to work harder. As part of working harder and getting more for myself, in the process, I'm actually making society better because I'm creating things, I'm innovating, I'm starting businesses,
There you
which is
go.
creating jobs, which is helping other people be able to afford to live. And so like it's a system that works versus a system that doesn't work. And I'd rather not have a system that was based on sin essentially. But this is the world in which we live, and so we need to operate based on the actual reality of the world, rather than again the land of fairies and unicorns.
Amen. And um, I guess I say rainbows, and I'm probably going to stir the pot a little bit, but
Oh,
there's
I know.
two
I think I know where you're
two
going there.
two prominent flags, and I've got a daughter that's homosexual. Love her to death. It was hard for her to come out and tell me about it, but she's my shining star. But I'm the first one to say your pride flag and the transgender flag are two of the ugliest flags I've ever seen. And that's just my opinion, but oh God. So
Yeah.
the whole rainbow and a whole month of celebrating the pride. Give me a break. To me, there's just something nefarious that has taken over, especially when that goes inside the brick and mortar of those schools. The way I see it, Chuck,
Yeah.
is we definitely have societal issues, no doubt in my mind. Okay, and where I feel like it's intruded into the brick and mortar of the schools. The bottom line is those teachers, those administrators are there to teach. There's a reason why our standing here in this country in Maine is, we've gone from 21st X number of years ago. Now we're 41st in the state of Maine as far as the United States goes. My issue is quit it with that bar. We're failing miserably as a country. So don't tell
Yeah.
me here in Gorham that we have great quality education. Okay, compared to what bar is what I'm trying to say is that we've got to do a better job. I'm not satisfied that the state of Maine is 43rd in the country. We can target and say, where that has stemmed from. I point my finger right at the commissioner of education here in the state of Maine.
And they're
But again,
making.
you said it, not me. I promised my good friend that I would not. I know her and know her husband. And anyways, yes,
Well,
you're
yeah, well, the comments that she's made, I'm going to say this because like we're talking about education and the failure in education, and like these metrics that you're talking about, which are the historic standards of the way in which we measure, and we it's not about you hate like to some degree you don't like measuring people, but at the same time you have to have standard a way to evaluate how well somebody how capable somebody is at learning and understanding complex things, and the best way to do it at this point are these standardized tests. And so and looking at these different things, but beyond the fact that Maine is doing so poorly, she's talked about, and other people who are paying attention have probably seen her making these comments that we don't care about reading, writing, arithmetic,
bingo. Yep.
math, math and science and
Yep.
whatnot, because of AI. And here's the thing: is I can sit you down with two people, one person who like actually is really intelligent as a problem solver, and then sit you down with somebody else who doesn't understand how to read, write, and do math. And I can tell you which one of them is going to be more effective at using AI. Right. And so like even if AI is here, we need people to be able to reason and come to conclusions and learn. And you said it. So I'm going to kind of piggyback on it, so to speak, and just say like the America has fallen, right? So Maine, which used to be the top in America used to be one of the top in the world. We've dropped substantially in education. And
Meanwhile,
on
meanwhile, the price has
oh
gone up.
gosh, yeah, especially here in Maine, where I did some research for my campaign last year, where I think we were ninth most expensive on a per student basis in the country, but we're ranking in the 40s, right? And what's interesting is, and this gets at some of the problems in the education system, for sure, is the teacher salaries in Maine over against the national average. That we're paying our teachers somewhere around 40th. And so we're ranking 40th, we're paying our teachers 40th, but we're spending the ninth most in the country, which seems to suggest that the money, it's not that we're not spending enough money, it's that the money's not going in the right place.
Correct.
And then there's some other
Correct.
factors about parents and our
Well,
schools.
well,
Yeah. Anyway,
and,
I'll
and
let.
well, and here's the factors, and I've reached out to my good, liberal Democrat friends. I have many of them, in an effort. Many of them are educators. So over the course of the last, 3 or 4 weeks, I'll call these people up. They know me well enough, and I'll ask them point blank, what the is going on in the schools? Here's what I've discovered, Chuck. And it ties back to, and this is a very debatable subject, but back to what I was talking about. There's societal issues,
Yep.
okay? Somebody safe at home? Are they abused? What are the disciplines in a household? Is there bullying? are there, and this is, the what I can't get my arms around is this small, finite part of the population that suffers from mental illness, transgenderism, or, homosexuality. How that small, tiny percent of the population has become the forefront of the school systems and chatter and talk and so when the Commission of Education makes the statement that social emotional learning is going to take a precedence over academics,
Yeah.
I boy, I've been said, hey, you got to be kind to the teachers and Ben, keep it down. I'm bullshit because again, within the confines of that brick and mortar, you're there to teach society's issues, and we all have a duty to help with societal issues. I'm not negating that,
Mm.
but I'm trying to differentiate, the Maslow's pyramid and all this social emotional learning. That's outside your four walls, gang.
Yeah.
Well, Benny, have you volunteered in the school system lately? Have you been in a fourth grade classroom where, out of a class of 18, there's four disruptive kids and they're, things are out of control? And I'm like, well, if there's a disruptive child, in my mind, you take that child, remove them, send them to the principal's office, you continue to teach. Don't bring in societal issues and all this stuff and social emotion. It doesn't add up, Chuck. It just doesn't add up. You're there to teach, your core studies. And I listened to our superintendent, the first school committee meeting that I attended this year. I'm ashamed to admit it was the first one I ever attended. I listened to this person talk for 45 minutes on three topics. Okay. Mental health crisis, the mental health crisis, the mental health crisis, the mental health crisis, the mental health crisis. So I took it. I'm sitting there. There wasn't a big crowd. I'm like, okay, she's talking about mental health crisis. Then she went in to talk about her glorified survey that of a town of 17,000 people. She had a glorified survey that 690 people took the survey out of a town of 17,000. Captured audience, Chuck, who was she really surveying? Teachers, administrators, families, kids, people that have a direct tie to
Yeah.
the school system. Let's forget about the other, 15,000 people that make up the entire town. So it went on for 20 minutes on the mental health crisis. We need
Yeah.
more counselors. We need psychologists. We need everything to deal with the mental health crisis. I'll grant you the pandemic, sure.
Yeah.
Let's table that. Then she went into talking about, this survey and in this survey, for example, Chuck, one of the questions was, what's your race? Please help me to understand what race has to do with academics. And then thirdly, I'll shut up. Last but not least was the code. This new wonderful code, which on the surface sounds great. It's, be honest, point out good deeds on the surface. But to me, there's something nefarious about it. Some people call it the chilling effect. So I
Mm.
listened to the superintendent of schools for what was 45 minutes discuss everything but math, science, literature, English language. There was nothing that the superintendent of schools spoke about when it comes to teaching and academics. Nothing. And that's when I said,
Yeah.
this is wrong.
Yeah.
Wrong.
Yeah, well, obviously, one of the things that we would say is like, thank you for stepping up and jumping into that void. Like Truth Slinger has some comments, and there's a couple other people that have commented, so I want to give them. So thank you for joining us, Truth Slinger, and you're making a lot of really great comments. Yes, they're indoctrinating kids. The tail is wagging the dog. education, yeah. And anyway, indoctrination again, but yeah, and they are culture forming, corrupt, and yeah, Maine schools unfortunately have become a cesspool, is what David Sewell said, and I agree. And when you talk about like this, something that's like shifted more and more, but like I used to work in banking. I worked in banking for about 15 years, and one of the common refrains in banking is we should teach banking and finance in the education system, right? And like I got the more I heard that, the more frustrated I got. One of the problems that we actually have in our society is that we expect the schools to do things that the schools shouldn't do, right? Like parents are not teaching their kids finance. They're not even trying to understand finance themselves. And so the answer is, well, we need the schools to do it. We need the schools to do it. We need the schools to do it. Do we have maybe a mental health crisis in our world? Sure. I don't understand why the school system needs to be the solution. That doesn't make sense. They're not a mental health institution. They are an
Correct.
education institution. And so if
Correct.
there's a mental health issue and there are children that are not behaving, that are not, behaving in a way that is healthy and appropriate, then like it used to be that came back to the parents. And the parents have to figure that out. But now the parents are like, but the school is the answer to everything that has to do with my kids. No, your parents are the ones that are consistently supposed to be involved in every aspect of the life of their children. They're the ones responsible for this. They're the ones that need to figure out a solution. The school system is supposed to educate children in, math, science, reading, writing, history. This is what the school system exists for, not social emotional learning, which is just at this point is a fancy phrase for we want to make sure they feel good in the here and now.
Thank
Um,
you.
and
Thank
like I look, here's the thing, like how one of my favorite film series is it's probably the greatest mini series of all time. It's called Band of Brothers. You watch Band of Brothers, and one of the things that you'll note in the first episode, you may find yourself hating the guy who trained them before they had to go into the field. And his name is Sobel, and he was terrible. Like they to the point where they like. I mean, they hated him with a deep hatred because he was harder on their unit than anybody else was on any other unit, and they were so mad and frustrated. But then they became the most decorated unit in World War II as they were in some of the most horrific situations in in World War II, but that any human beings have had to endure really in war. It's so when you look at it, they like the purpose isn't like if that like commander Sobel had made them feel good in the here and now and made them feel like heroes before they ever went into war and was really soft on them. That doesn't happen, right? And so like ultimately, like in a similar way, the education system is about preparing kids for life. And if anything, those kids need to learn how to deal with difficult situations, not how to be like, oh, how do I feel in the moment? It's like you have to figure it out. There's another scene from what is it? Remember the Titans? I don't know if you're familiar with it. As
Yeah,
a football
absolutely.
coach, you
Football.
must
Yeah,
be. Petey, when
absolutely.
Petey was you think he was a quarterback or I think it was at the time, and he made a mistake and he was mad and he was going to walk off the field, and Denzel's character let him go, but the white coach, I can't remember his name, he like went and like was really nice to him and got him to like feel good about himself and go back, and he made a good play on defense. And later on, Denzel and that coach are having a conversation, and the coach is like, "You're welcome," and Denzel's like, I'm not thanking you. You think you're helping these kids by coddling them? Like when this kid, especially in that society, when this kid gets out into the real world, he's not going to have people who are like holding his hand through these difficult challenges. You're
He'll,
actually handicapping these kids. And that's what we're
yeah, but
doing right now as a society. We're
it,
handicapping children by being so focused on how they feel in the here and now versus preparing them for life.
let's but Chuck, let's give them all participation trophy. Yay! Yay! Give me a break.
Yeah.
And that's part of it. It's funny, an interesting conversation with a math teacher just the other day. Um, and when I went right down this hole of the social emotional learning, what's going on, and I said, "Hey, Gorham Watchdogs stumbled upon a videotape of one of your algebra teachers there in the school of Gorham back when they were in lockdown, masked up. They were doing virtual learning. So one of the students coming from a conservative family during an algebra lesson, again, algebra, um, just pulled his phone out and started videotaping the lesson. And this algebra teacher, in the argument from the teacher I'm talking, having the conversation was, well, Benny, teachers should be allowed to have their opinions. I'm like, yeah. She goes, for example, she says, I teach math and you're a banker, Chuck. So she was or used to be. And she was like, well, I like to try to teach kids, about 401ks or working on taxes or trying to teach those real. I said, that's great. And she immediately went into the emotional, well, Benny, if teachers can't, share their opinions, such as a 401k, a math teacher helping a 401k, issues and teachers, I'm all for that. However, back to the video clip that we have of this algebra teacher who's up talking about, at the time there was something, I think it was out in California, where there was this Oriental shooting or something. It was all about discrimination against Orientals. So she was talking about that, and then also was talking about to the students in an algebra class about your carbon footprint. And you have to be concerned about your carbon foot. So enter the algebra class where we're bringing in, again, societal issues, race and then the carbon footprint thing. Like, what's that got to do with algebra?
Right.
It's fine if you're a math teacher and you're trying to
What if
help
they
kids
started?
understand.
What if they started talking about Jesus?
Well,
I'm not advocating for that, by the way. Like, I don't think that when you're teaching math, there's really no point in bringing Jesus into the conversation. But my point is, like, they would lose their minds if somebody was trying to like convert somebody to a faith.
exactly.
And like our carbon, even if you believe in climate change, or more
I don't,
broadly, if
by
you
the way. I think
care,
it's a hoax.
yeah,
Just so
even
time out. We're on the same.
yeah. But even more broadly, if you care about the environment, what does that have to do with math? And like, I'm not interested. I'm against racism, right? My wife is Rwandan. I'm not a fan.
You're not systemically racist, Chuck.
I mean, I'm white and I'm a man, so I'm clearly racist and sexist, and I'm the I'm the cause of all the problems around the world. But these things don't belong in math. So I was a math major, by the way, and like there was like this one comment, but like when I think of like where teachers brought like politics into math. I went to the most liberal of the liberal arts colleges at the time, at least we thought they were. I don't know if it's still the case, but the University of Maine at Farmington. I went there and like, even there in my math classes, like I can only remember, I'm not saying it didn't happen more often, but I can only remember one teacher actually making a comment about about anything that went outside of like math into a political or religious kind of thing. And it was a teacher was, I think it was a joke or something like that. That was like Adam and Eve was part of the question. It's like, and he's like, if you believe that myth, and it's like, that's the only thing that, and like, and this is again, what my point is, like, I'm at a very liberal school in a college where these things, and like this type of stuff is largely in math classes anyway. In other classes is a whole nother story. I can tell you some fun stories about my psychology class, but in the math class, they don't usually get into that because it's not relevant to math, right? And so it's really bizarre that those things are how they would come up in conversation naturally. Anyway, so
Well,
I don't have a problem with teachers sharing their perspectives, but their job is not to teach kids on things that are outside of their purview. But they think their job is to like be essentially the parents. They call kids their kids, rather than the parents' kids, right? Like yes, they're my students. If you're a teacher, that you should see them as your students, but they're not your kids. They're your
Right.
students.
Yeah.
It's very
Those,
different. It's
those,
not your
those guys,
responsibility to teach them social values. That's actually the parents. Um,
yeah. So,
so
and it just so happens that in my mind, it just raises a bunch of flags that we happen to have one intelligent student during that time pull his phone out and here's algebra class, mom, and
yeah,
videotaping that. It raises the question, Chuck, and I've thrown this out there. It raises the question: what else is being spoon fed? Teach the kids how to think, not what to think. So what's being spoon fed? We had this one video. It raises a flag in my mind. What else is going on? I'm all for put cameras in the rooms, audio visual. Well, the parents won't like that. Well, if we've got society issues, parents, they're working two jobs, they're struggling to make ends meet, and yes, there's a duty and a responsibility for these parents. I'm all in favor of put cameras in the rooms. If you're doing a good job, you're not talking about the crap. There's nothing to worry
yeah,
about. That's a
yeah.
debatable. It's a debatable
Yeah,
subject.
it's an
Or
interesting conversation. I think I'd probably be more in favor than
I just throw it
it's
out there.
interesting. No, it's an interesting thought. Amber agrees with you, by the way. She's in the chat. But like, yeah, it's a question. It's a question for sure. There's this idea of privacy, and I think we need more privacy. But at the same time, we've got rogue teachers, and I do think that there are other ways to address that type of stuff than having cameras in there. I am kind of concerned with partly because of stuff like this, with this move to like remove cell phones from classrooms. Now, if you want to ask me the question, am I incredibly concerned with the fact that like kids are addicted to their phones? And I'm addicted to my phone, if I'm being completely honest, right? We're all addicted to screens at this point. If you live in the
right,
first world,
right.
it's hard not to be. Like we all spend way too much time there, but kids have a much more difficult time regulating that, I think, because like, especially if they haven't learned some other skills. It's really easy for them to get sucked into just being on your phone all day, which obviously is unhealthy, especially in the long run.
Absolutely.
But the concern is like stories like the one that you just shared, we wouldn't learn about. We wouldn't know. We wouldn't be able to prove that some of this stuff was happening if these kids didn't have their phones. And so it's like if you're going to remove the phones, then I guess doing something like what you're talking about would make sense. But let's shift real quick, because like, okay, so you're from Gorham, and you've mentioned Gorham Watchdogs a number of times. What are the Gorham Watchdogs? What are you guys doing? How are you kind of pushing back against the insanity of what's going on in our schools, in Gorham in particular?
Great question. We knew that. I'll back up a little bit.
Yeah.
Last year we had a referendum in a budget vote here in Gorham. It made the headlines because the budget was passed by a 4-vote margin. Okay, meaning the increase in the budget, whatever it was at, X number of multi-millions of dollars.
Was that the second vote, or was that the first
It
time?
was I believe it was the first vote.
Okay.
Public referendum came down to it was 2000 to 2000. There was a difference of 4 votes. Well, there was a bunch of us, myself included, that said, well, wait a minute, time out. That's a margin of potential margin of error that we went into the town of Gorham and said we want a recount. Well, we got the deer in the headlight look because the town of Gorham had never done a recount. Which, I mean, you and I can talk a long time about elections integrity. We're still using the machines here in Gorham, whole separate subject. So we went
Yep.
to the town clerk and said, we want a recount. Only 4 votes. We want to make sure. So they had never done it. We defaulted to the state of Maine. What's protocols on municipal referendum ballots. Long story short, said, okay, you can get a recount, but you have to have have to get 150 signatures to do this. Okay, I'll be back in a few days. Got the 150 signatures, so we got a recount. We had X number of people show up. It took us probably about 3 or 4 hours. Turns out two of the ballots couldn't be distinguished, and how did the machine read them versus human eyes looking at this? Two of the ballots were kicked out. So that budget vote won in favor of the increase in the budget by 2 votes. And that really kind of set me in motion. Fast forward to this year. I spent my time out knocking on doors and talking to people, and all these discussions, Chuck, about what's going on in the school system. The budget's out of control. What are all these line items? And so it snowballed. I've got a pretty powerful group of a bunch of people that I know here in Gorham that are like minded. I'm like, I'm tired of this. We've got to do something. Let's pick the budget apart. Have some intelligent people go through this. Where's the fluff? Where's the crap? And it led to again me working with some really like-minded people that have been involved in town politics. Enter a breath of fresh air. This gentleman Victor Hansen that is doing digital marketing. He's in sales. I coached him in football, and it's kind of funny because now the roles for us are reversed. He still refers to me as coach. However, in many ways, he's coaching me as a 27 or 28-year-old with all of this podcasting, back end technology. How do you market? How do you get your word out? So we started a web page. We started a Facebook page. 6 o'clock every Wednesday night, I'm hosting a live virtual town hall. People can sign up. So Victor's really been the wind beneath our wings at Gorham Watchdogs. He came up. He and I happen to go to the Standish Dog Park every Saturday with I've got 2 dogs here, and he just got thinking Bonnie Eagle has actually got the Bonnie Eagle Watchdog. So we kind of went with that theme, and we've been sailing ever since. So it's been fun. And I started this podcast off with you saying, manifest your own destiny with righteous indignation, and that's where we're at.
Yeah, well, this is. I mean, I love hearing about this because this is how we change our world. Again, one of the things I commented on earlier, and usually in we'll call it my monologue, if you want to call it that. It's basically I say the same thing. Maybe it's just the normal intro is a better way to put it, but is that we need to focus on local politics first and be most engaged actually in local politics. Like I remember I've shared this story probably a number of times on the podcast, but not everybody listens to every part. So I remember going door to door, and I met this one guy. This is in 2022, so no presidential race on the ballot. And this guy who I had a good conversation with, who is a conservative Republican, strong Republican in terms of voting record. He might have been an independent actually, but it doesn't matter. He was like, well, I only vote in presidential elections because that's when my vote counts the most. And I'm like, no, sir, it's the exact opposite, right? Like, when you have an election, as you just commented, that's decided by 2 votes, and you had thousands of people who didn't vote, right? If you got 3 people out to vote, that changes that vote, and now we win. We go from losing and increased budgets with no accountability with virtually no accountability to to like not passed, and now they have to go back and rework it and figure out what to do better. So
One of the,
yeah. So
what
local matters so much. It's so important and so valuable.
well,
Your vote matters so
I want
much.
to piggyback. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
No,
you,
you're
Chuck. But
good.
one
Feel
one of the
free.
things I want to piggyback on is I don't know if you've ever been down 114 in Gorham. There's a huge Trump trailer. It's got the flags on top. It's the old Bennett farm. Well, there's a gal that's part of the Gorham Watchdogs. Her name's Melanie Bennett. she was out with me last year when we were getting, trying to get signatures. Hey, we need a recount. We need a recount. And
So let me just understand this real quick.
yep,
You had to get signatures to get a recount.
correct. That's
So in a vote that was decided by 4 people, four votes, they wouldn't just do a recount.
no,
That's
no, no, no,
ridiculous.
no.
Okay, continue.
Wait,
Continue. I just want to highlight
uh, uh,
how
yeah,
insane that is. Like that should be an
yep,
automatic
correct.
recount.
Right,
Go ahead.
without even thinking twice about it. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I won't get into the town politics, but there's some people running the show in there that stonewalled us, and we were persistent and said, no, that it mathematically it makes sense. It's
Yeah.
anyway. So
Well within the margin of error, like
well,
mathematically.
it's
As a
so
math major. Like
right,
that's yeah.
right. So, anyways, a quick story. Melanie Bennett, who's one of the family members there, went out helped getting signatures for this recount, and she stumbled across some kids. I think were like 19 or 20, and asked them point blank, are you registered to vote? Or did she ask if they voted? I think they were registered to vote, but they didn't vote. And there were 2 young men. She said she'll never forget it. She goes, you guys realize you could have changed, just you two could have changed the outcome of a $50+ million budget that you're all paying for. So it just it does, and that's where it's at. People, because we're all quick to criticize, but people have to exercise that constitutional right to vote. I mean, we had 4,000 votes in a town of 17,000. Now, I don't know what the exact numbers are on registered voters, but that small segment of the population decided, we're at, this, we're at, I believe we're at close to 48% increase in taxes here in Gorham over the past 4 years, Chuck. That's outrageous.
That's
That's
that I
you're
mean,
the math guy.
yeah, no,
That's
that's wild in a 4-year period. That's just that's way too much of an increase in taxes. I think Westbrook's trying to compete. That's where I live. I live over in Westbrook, not far away. We think in the last 2 years, I think it's like over 20% just in the last 2 years alone. I think
But
I think
Westbrook's got some good, there's some industry, there's some commercial revenue in Westbrook that Gorham doesn't have that
yeah.
help offset that. So,
Yeah, you would think,
anyway,
but like I said, like in the last 2 years, like I'm pretty sure we last year we were one of the highest in the nation for a single year. There was some article about Westbrook, one of the highest in the nation, single year increase in taxes for a municipality.
wow.
But everywhere around here, it's going crazy, and like to question it. Let's get at this. These are the tactics that are used by the other side right now. Is like if you question this increase in taxes and say, "Wow, this is just way too much money. The average person can't afford this." Why do you hate our children?
Right.
It's like, huh?
It,
Wait a
it,
sec. What?
right,
I'm saying I
right.
can't afford this, and you're saying I hate people?
Yeah, yeah, and those are the tax. I mean, the other side here in Gorham is we love Gorham schools. So they go out, they paint their signs. We love Gorham schools. Well, I'm all for public education, even with its faults. What I'm anti is anti-budget. What's going
Yeah,
on with your budget is, it's 64% of our taxes goes to the schools.
yeah.
So I'm not
And
no,
and
I'm not against education.
and not to mention, oh, did I lose it? Well, I think I lost
I'm
my
still
brain.
here.
No,
Yeah.
I'm my
Oh,
thought, but oh
should
yeah.
have had
So the
another
other thing is
strawberry.
not to mention like the increase in taxes and how much of that impact, but also like we're paying more and getting less, right? Like this is the problem is like we look at, and what's interesting is I think the push from the Maine Department of Education is like making our, because of the rise in AI and lack of importance supposedly in these things that obviously are actually important, such as math, science, reading, writing, history. Um, uh, like there's this kind of idea that I know that in Westbrook, when people complain about the school budget because like the kids like the test scores were not doing well. Like Westbrook's not doing well in relation to all of Maine. I don't know how Gorham is ranking in Maine, but either way, when we're not doing that well, and so when people
We're,
bring that up,
we're,
some of the
we're, we're,
teachers
the,
and
we're, the, we're the best of the worst. How's
okay, the
that?
best of the worst. All right. So when teachers or people who work in the school system, like who are supportive of the current administration and the current approach, their response is basically, "My children, I don't care about what those test scores say. My children are kind and smart." Like according to what standard? Like first of all, I care a little bit less whether I mean I want kids to be kind. Again, I think that's something that the parents teach, and that there are certain like there is a level of like you have to create order, and so there has to be like behaviors that are tolerated and not tolerated within a school system. So yeah, I mean they should be able to behave to get through a meeting, but like I actually am not terribly concerned with whether how kind they are as much as I am concerned with whether or not they're learning anything. And when you say they're smart, by what standard? You
Right.
get to say they're
Exactly.
smart. Every other standard we have, there's two things. There's one actual standardized tests, right, which is a standard, and then there's this thing called the eye test. And I'm sorry, but you're failing the eye test, right? Like I worked in management and am dealing with people who are further along in this process before it got as bad as it is now. And they're already, once they get out of college, once they get out of high school, having a really difficult time adjusting and being members of society and having a job and being prepared to do basic things and deal with limited stress. That's already a problem and it's just getting worse. So like you're failing the eye test because like even if you think that they're smart, like the reality is they're not, especially compared to previous generations, participating at as high of a level in our society. And we have all these job shortages in all these different categories, and the anyway they're just not up to snuff. I would rather, if I'm not hiring what I do these days, but if I were hiring, I would be much more likely to hire a boomer who is semi-retired than somebody right out of high school, because like I know that one of them is going to show up to work. They're going to work hard, and they're going to get the job done, and not make excuses for the most part. I'm not perfect. Gen X would probably be a bit better choice, but anyway, like if I had to choose, I know this is ageism and it's illegal in America, but the reality is my point is about the fact that like in general, by and large, they're not nearly as productive. They're not nearly as capable. One of the things that I sometimes say is like they basically coming in as a brand new employee with no experience and no track record, no history. They expect to be treated with the red carpet treatment, to be treated as though they're this like, oh my gosh, we're going to pay you exactly what we would pay somebody who's been with the company for 40 years, who knows all the ins and outs and all this other kind of stuff, has got tenure. They want to be paid at the same level. They want to be treated like they're the same. And then when they have to do anything difficult, they need you to hold your hand all the way through it, and then praise them for you doing it for them. And
Exactly.
they want to be praised for showing up to work. And so like this is a problem. They're failing the eye test. So the taxes are going up. The results of how these kids are doing is going down.
Yeah. And I'll piggyback that. And on top of that, Chuck, we've got these kids so confused on their pronouns.
Yeah.
What do you, what and I got into it with this teacher the other day, and I said, what's this crap about pronouns? Oh, well, Benny, you know that, in Unum and in the corporate world now, it's acceptable, when anybody has their resume and when they put out a document or whatever, they put he, him, she, her, all. Huh? I'm an ex-executive search consultant. Okay. I've dealt with corporations, I've dealt with startup teams, the whole nine yards. And I still consult and work with young people, okay, when they're set up for interviews or negotiating. I've worked with hiring managers like yourself, Chuck. And I tell them, If I see he, him, she, her on your resume, by that mere little designation, you're alienating 50% of your potential hiring people because there's people like us. I see that.
Yeah.
I don't buy it. I don't like it. It's confusing to the kids. We've got middle school teachers here in Gorham. We've got the emails of them praising the kids and using their pronouns. I don't know if they have the litter boxes in Gorham yet, but that's a whole, it's along that same line, using these pronouns. And it just
Yeah.
stop enough. Beautiful stories. I had a friend of mine that teaches Spanish, I believe out in Falmouth, and they tried to encroach on his Spanish teaching that language. He's like, nah, not going to go there. The Spanish language won't let you do it.
Oh
Nice
no, it
try.
won't.
Get out of
Yeah.
here. Get out of here. So we've got these kids thinking about sexuality. What are their You've got them so confused on the English language, Chuck. That's what I have a problem with. But we have to be accepting, and these kids that don't know their gender yet. The fact that they're even talking about gender or sexuality in the school system, I'm irate about that.
Yeah.
Well,
Doesn't
corporations
belong.
are doing it now, Benny, and that's kind of typical. No,
Yeah.
stop, stop. So
Yeah, I'm wholeheartedly with you. What's interesting and funny is I like to point to South Park when the world is really ridiculous. And South Park made fun of this stuff because before it became such a big cultural issue. With this, I can't remember what the guy's name is, but he was a transgender athlete, I guess, that was competing against Strong Woman, which was one of the characters, and he was this like really big buff guy, like obviously a guy deep ever like it just like anyway. But that aside, they had another episode years ago mocking this idea of like, so before we even get into like gender and like the confusion of the pronouns and all this other kind of stuff, there was what happened before, which I remember parents being upset about, I think when I was a kid, which is teaching sexuality, like sex ed in school, which again, South Park was effectively making fun of this, and what they were highlighting in their comedic way was that when you start teaching sex ed to this grade, then this grade learns about it, and then they're engaged, and now
wow,
you have to
yeah,
teach sex ed to that younger age. And
wow,
like
yeah,
in the episode, they're teaching, they're like, oh, we need to start teaching sex ed to babies, and it's like, are you, like, you guys are insane. And so the point is, like, you're actually not helping the problem. And the whole reason that it happened, again, going back to our theme here, is parents, right? One of our themes, parents pushed for this because they didn't want to have difficult conversations with their kids, right? This is something that should be being taught in the home. And like, there are people who are like, but it's not being taught, and so we as a society, no, I don't, like, we need
yep,
to make parents recognize that this is their responsibility and stop giving them an excuse to pass off their responsibility to the education system. Is absolutely ridiculous. This is how we devolve as a society, is by giving up the rightful responsibility to somebody
yep,
else. And so then you get into like the pronouns, which one of the things that's fun is my wife is Rwandan, lives in Kenya, and so there are two languages that she speaks outside of English. Neither one of them have pronouns. I noticed this when I was talking to some people when I was in Rwanda, and they would one of the mistakes that they made with pronouns in English, because again, English is not their native language, is instead of like, if they were going to say, like, so I'm a guy, I have a niece, and I would be talking about like Chuck's niece. It would be something like, instead of like saying like his niece, they would say her niece, because they would think that the pronoun reflects the person that's being talked about
that,
afterwards rather
gotcha,
than me, right?
yep,
So they
yep,
don't so that's how they don't even like, they're because they don't, in neither of those languages do they actually even have pronouns. They actually don't, like, the word that means, like, again, if you're doing translation, and you have to figure it out from context. Is it a girl? Then it's she. Is it a boy? Because they actually don't have a different
right,
word, unlike Spanish, where it's like they've got all the Spanish and French and these other languages where they've got everything is either male or female, right? On the flip side, this is like everything is nothing. And so anyway, but like this, so some of the pronouns that they're using are just like like just
Yeah.
out there. But then there's even they them, right? They them, these are plural words. Like, are we talking about somebody who's has multiple personality disorder, right? Like from talking about the English language, going back to what you're saying, is like these are nonsensical phrases. Like if you want to say that there's something else in between, don't use well-established words that are that are plural. That they is, because that's they
And
is,
then wonder why
yeah,
your ELL scores and your test scores
right,
are going down. It's
right. It's I mean, you're literally introducing confusion when you should
right.
be
That's
educating and like,
that's the
again,
problem.
you shouldn't be engaged in these issues. This is not your place. It's also not corporations' place. But the problem, though, as I've said on this podcast before, is the problem is that we're battling against some people who are ideologically captured. Like some of them are corrupt and evil, right? I think that there's a level of that at some level, and who those people are, I don't know exactly. But then there's just a level of like ideological capture. Or fear, whatever it is, where people actually believe that these kids are something other than how they were born, and that we need to be, you know, if we don't affirm that. This is why they won't back down on this like boys and women's sports issue, right? This a part of it is politicians can never admit that they were wrong, but the other part is that like what they've been preaching and what they still claim to believe is that if you don't completely affirm somebody who believes that they're the opposite gender in every way, then you're basically saying that they don't exist. Like you're it's almost like, again, they have those terms like dead naming. It's not exactly the same thing, but so like if you don't allow a boy who thinks he's a girl to compete in women's sports, then you're saying he's not a woman. And then if you're saying that he's not a woman, then you're saying then you're at risk of helping lead to his potential suicide, right?
But
He's gonna kill himself as a result of that.
you,
Like they actually believe that. This is the problem with their ideology, is that they're so stuck in it that they can't even escape and recognize, well, wait a second, even if this is okay, here's a clear example of how this doesn't fit scientifically.
and
If we get into science, it's dangerous,
send
but
you a and I'll send you a document. We have a clip of an email from a Gorham Middle School teacher, and it's clear as day. And I'll send that to you because you could have a whole topic of discussion. Now, I would venture to guess, Chuck, that many, and I don't know your audience, but you in brevity, you mentioned dead name. That's a real thing. In this document, an email from a middle school teacher, she talks about this. And I'll guarantee you, most people, parents, don't even know what you and I are discussing. I do know
yeah,
what you're talking about, dead name.
yep,
And that's, I'll send you the document because this needs to be discussed. The other thing I'd like to say is, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us as citizens society, we have to get to a point where we understand where is this ideology coming from. Is it UNESCO? Is it the United Nations education arm? I think we need to start finding out who control, where are these seminars, these retreats, where do these teachers go to get all of this stuff, and point out who are the puppet masters. You've heard that phrase. Who's
yeah,
driving this? Is it the UN? Is it these teacher affiliations? I think in my mind, I'm on the search to figure that out, because when you find out where it's stemming from, where it's coming from, in my mind, that the head of that dragon needs to come off. I'm sorry.
yeah. Well, we need
Things are
some. We've got some good journalists out there. Maybe this will be something we can get. Maybe not we can get, but it would be great if Michael Schellenberger or somebody like that could
Yep.
find a way
Yep.
to get to the bottom of it, because he's fantastic, and there's a couple others that are really good and actually
I'd like to
doing
be a part of
real
that. I
things.
really would like to be a part of that, because that needs to get out there. People need to understand this is where the ideology is coming from. This is how it's coming into the schools. But what's the source? And
Yeah.
so good. So
And so
It's a tough.
how can people fight back? What's your like what would you say to people who are like, I understand that there's a problem, I don't know what to do?
I in Gorham, definitely check us out, gorhamwatchdogs.com. Reach out, volunteer. At some point, people will get called to action. It might not be now, but you have to be involved. And I get that in there's an issue with local politics. Fortunately, well, here's a good point of discussion. Fortunately, my kids are out of the Gorham schools. My
Mm,
understanding from many parents that if you become actively vocal, start raising these issues, that inside the brick and mortar, they can kind of alienate your kids in different ways. I don't care anymore. My kids are gone.
yeah.
So get involved. You know, you be not afraid. Put the full armor of God on. I think you know this is huge. This is a problem morally, psychologically. Reach out to podcasts. Start getting educated. People can make a difference. Get to know your neighbor. Talk to your neighbor. Hey, what do you see in the school systems? Talk to other parents because I'll guarantee you there's other parents right around you that are kind of shaking their head going, this doesn't make sense. It doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. So
Well, I think
and
I think
go
you
ahead.
highlighted one of the most important elements, which is like, well, you obviously get involved, go to your school board meetings, connect with other people, have
Correct.
conversations. But that's so these are difficult, especially if you're in southern Maine or you're in a very liberal dominated area. Although I will say that in some areas that are more conservative, we still find that there are very liberal school boards, despite being in a conservative area. So, just because you're in a conservative area, it might be challenging to like speak up, especially because the other side has weaponized empathy, and is trying to make anybody who stands up and says anything again, like, oh, if you're going to question this, it's because you want kids to die, or
Yeah.
that you don't care about our education. It's like, no, 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 like, stop this.
Yeah.
Like, we
Right.
need to be brave
Right.
people. This is what we're asking for right now. Nobody's asking you to go into the trenches in an actual war and take bullets and kind of go into no man's land. What we are saying is, like, if we don't stop being quiet, if we don't start speaking up, we have no hope. And we need to have those difficult conversations. We need to be brave people. We need to be courageous, and we need to have difficult conversations with people that we may disagree with, and try to find, if we can, some common ground and find a path forward in this world. Not everybody who believes some of these ideologies is morally corrupt and evil. They've just bought in as part of what's going on here. And how are they going to get out of that? Well, they're not going to get out of it by having us yell at them. They're not going to get out of it by just being in their own echo chamber, right? How they're going to get out of it is brave people having courageous conversations and helping people realize what's really going on in our world, and also why that's not a good idea, right? Like, one of the things I sometimes try to bring up, is this idea that, like, they're trying to push this out of, like, this idea that it's civil and it's nice or whatever, but but this, I need to use pronouns. I tried to do it in my old job and I just refused to do it. I sought to not be rude, and I just didn't use pronouns with people who fell into that category. I would just use their
Oh,
name. That's how I would approach it. Because, like, I want to build relationships with people, and then hopefully through that, maybe we can have a deeper conversation at some point down the road. But you don't get there if you immediately offend them. Again, that's not my fault; it's theirs. But at the same time, like, how do we find a path forward? Um, and then I lost my train of thought, but anyway, we need to find ways to chart a path forward, because people are in these, they've again, they're not all bad people. I guess that's the point. They're not, they actually buy into this stuff, and we're not going to help them get out of it if they're just, again, in their own echo chamber.
here's one of the kind of the paradigm shifts that I'm working on. You ask how can you make a difference? Part of me being a coach, having two wonderful kids, is how do we get the student bodies involved? The kids that are in the brick and
Mm.
mortar that are going through this, how do we involve, engage, and
Turning Point
talk to
USA.
them? Well, right. And as parents, to have those
Yeah.
discussions, hey, mom, I don't like this. And if there's a situation, calling out that teacher, counselor, principal, whoever it was, and calling them out, say, hey, Johnny came home today and he was confused that Susie, who's transgender, is in the class. We understand that the class was 15 minutes correcting some kid about their pronouns when they actually weren't talking about biology or algebra. Chuck, we've got to engage these kids. I love having that ability of treating kids like adults. If they're 4 years
Yeah.
old, 5 years old, 6 year old, seven, however old they are, treat them like young adults. And I have
Yeah.
that gift in be able to do that with kids. So I'm trying to understand how, the instead of being the brick and mortar inside the secret walls and what's going on, you get, they spit out a report card, tell you, kid, you got ABC. How do we engage, start talking to these kids? What's going on? And opening up those communications, because it's the kids, and this is kind of my phrase with counselors or with the school committee. Do what's best for the kids. Do whatever. No, I tell you, do what's right for the kids, not what's best for your social circles or your whatever your ulterior motives are. We've got to engage these kids. We've got to find out. We've got, as a society, we have to, Chuck.
Yeah.
So I don't know the answers on that. Help me with it.
Yeah.
But how do we engage that student body to start uncovering what is confusing, crap, and beyond ideology? So somehow that's kind of my thoughts is inside. I want to talk to these kids. What
Yeah.
is going on?
So I think how we engage with them. So I mentioned Turning Point USA. It's a really great resource if you have kids who are interested in politics and interested in speaking up and things like that. Turning Point USA
That's
is a great
awesome.
place to connect. There's a chapter that I hope is going to be forming in Cumberland County, an activism hub. If you're interested and want to figure out how you can get your kids involved who are in school right now, let me know, or in school or homeschooled. It doesn't have to be, or even young adults under the age of, I think, 24 typically is what they shoot for. 24 or under, I should say, to get involved. We need young people to be engaged, and we need to train and equip them to be able to have these conversations, because it's really challenging. But I think how do we engage them as we engage them, right? Like, I think we need to be careful not to think that, like, kids, they're going to come to us, right? I think that one of the things I've noticed over time is that there's this really interesting challenge in our society, and how we fix this is by everybody just trying to address it, which is that, in my opinion, there's a gap, and the gap comes at the between millennials and Gen X. So millennials, generally speaking, can talk down, and I don't mean like condescendingly. I mean they can communicate to their generation and younger generations. Gen X can communicate to their generation and older generations. There are people that fall outside of this, but, like, generally speaking, as a generality, people who are Gen X or older have a hard time communicating to people who are millennials or younger, and
Yep.
vice versa, right? And how do we fix this? How do we address it? Like, we all have something to gain and learn from one another. We have to engage in conversation, and I think the younger generation is not going to, like, open up easily. And so I think it's just by trying to find ways, whatever we can, to engage with people and better understand their world. And I think it's interesting. I think you have some older millennials, which I fall into, and then younger Gen X people who basically have the ability to communicate both up and down the chain. And then again, there are some random individuals who I think, in general, people, no matter where they come from, maybe it's because of some work that they do or something like that, they're a little bit more equipped to have conversations with all generations. But I think it starts by just trying to have conversations, trying to build relationships, trying to get to know and understand. But one of the most effective ways to reach the younger generation is actually by recognizing this is it. So if you can get a conversation with somebody in person, great. But the reality is, the easiest way to connect with our younger generations is through TikTok and Instagram. And maybe there's another one that's going to be
For better,
coming
for
out
worse.
for the younger generations, which is why, I've been somebody who's anti-TikTok, anti-social media, really, for many years at this point. But I'm using these tools in order to try and reach people, because this is you got to go where people are. I was going door to door in 2022. And I went to as many doors as I possibly could. And a lot of people weren't there. And one of the things I realized in particular is, like, you don't see these younger generations, millennials and Gen Z. If they are home, they don't generally come to the door. And they're also not home a lot. So if you want to reach them, where do you go? Well, you have to go where they are, and where they are is in social media. And so that's one of the things that we try to do, is try to find people who can communicate and speak their language and get some content out into social media, but also have ways for them to get involved, like Turning Point USA. So that's a big part of what we do.
Good. No, I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, one of the other things that I keep, keep is this messaging in my own mind, is that, we take the square, we take the round peg and try to shove it into the square peg with education. Okay.
Yeah.
And, you know, not everybody's that college grad. We've got to do more to get kids involved with the trades.
Absolutely,
Agriculture,
100%.
farming, getting them outside. One of my partners at Gorham Watchdogs, we had this discussion the other day, and we're talking about, boy, what would be some cool ways in getting engaging kids in politics, learning that, look what Gorham Watchdogs is. Come shadow us for a day. Get involved. Come see Chuck's podcast. Hey, we're in getting those kids to be engaging. Not all and not everybody is meant to go down the 4-year college path.
Right.
Yet our system is set up to shove them that way. And I think this is a societal issue, Chuck.
Yep.
The society has to say, wait a minute. I've heard from people, prominent members in Gorhams like Benny. Hey, there's 20% good teachers. They take them, they shove them into college. The other 80% is a glorified babysitting service. And I don't buy that. That there's that population that I would love to volunteer, would love to work, take kids out, mountain biking, hiking, get them outdoors, fishing, hunting. What are these? How do we capture more of that audience, get them engaged in things other than lawyer, doctor, whatever. I think we're failing society on that 80% of the population, whether it's trades and let's face it, there's a core curriculum that we've set up that this is what we're supposed to teach. They're not teaching them, they're getting into societal issues, but I think it's important to engage, get this, again, the round peg in the square hole resonates with me, Chuck. What do we, as a society, what do we do to get, to better prepare these kids, show them alternatives, show them things, get them engaged with businesses, and open, one of the pathways to really life in general, not just, the structure of the school.
I almost think that like 50% of the quote unquote education time in high school should be interning and spending time working in local businesses or being in those types of environments for two reasons. One, making high school kids, who are some of the most toxic people in the world, primarily create their own culture in high school is one of the stupidest experiments that known to mankind. Is like, this is a good idea. Not really, right? So part of this would be exposing them to a bunch of different things, but it would also be exposing them and making them spend more time with people outside of their own generation, which would help reduce, I think, the insanity. I mean, when I say the insanity, but the mental health issues that a lot of high school kids have, it's partly because of the social anxiety of that age range, where they care so much about what their peers think of them. Well, let's maybe not have them spend so much time around their peers. Maybe that's part of the answer, and have them
Yeah.
be doing something with their hands and learning a
Yeah.
number of skills and trades. And I think having that be part of the rotation while they're a senior in high school, junior in maybe all throughout high school, right? I mean, 50% is probably high, but maybe 25%. There's something built in where they rotate and they learn different skills, learn
Yeah.
different trades, do some kind of interning with
Get
different
get
businesses and
get
industries.
get
Yeah.
them
So,
engaged rather than that lecture format. Sit there
right.
in your seat. You're going to learn algebra, come hell or high water, versus getting them engaged outside of that dictation, where
Yeah.
that, hey, in this field, this matters. Algebra is applicable here. Let me show you, and engaging them,
Yeah.
may help get rid of some of those anxieties if they're finding out what their love and their passion is, you know,
Yeah.
early, and
Yeah.
getting them engaged. So,
Yeah, and that's what they do in. So the University of Maine at Farmington is this like great teachers college, and one of the things that kind of sets them apart is this little thing, right? Third semester, generally speaking. So you go have 1 year, you take some, you're kind of like your gen eds as they call them, and then after that, your heavy education. In that third semester, you are focused on you're actually spending the majority of it in the classroom, whereas most education degrees, you don't go in the classroom until you're doing your final semester. I can't remember, student teaching, right? That's when you're first in the classroom, and a lot of teachers end up deciding when they're finally in the classroom, no, I don't want to be a teacher.
yeah,
Right. And so
yeah,
like what makes
because of
UMF
discipline
great
issues.
is
Yeah,
that they actually get the kid into that very early on. They get you to experience what it's going to be like. So you can, and some kids opt out at that point or realize I am interested in teaching, but different age range. So that time in person in the classroom, for instance, for future educators, is actually really valuable. And the point that I'm getting at here is that like having people try different things and do different types of tasks, and will help people better understand what they want to do with themselves in the future. So not only would this strategy that I'm proposing reduce stress, help prepare them better for life in general, it's going to give them a better sense of what they want to do
correct.
with their
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
Whereas right now, as you said, we put kids in the classroom and they're book learning. And right now they're not even really doing that, but we'll just say they're learning from books. And if they go to college, they're like, what's that? 16 years of having a teacher tell you something and your whole life being focused around pleasing the teacher. And then you get out into the real world, and it's like it's so totally different. You're not doing tests and doing reading and just trying to. You have to actually accomplish tasks, and you have to like do things in reality, and you've never had to do that before. So we need to fix that aspect of education,
100%
for
agree.
sure.
Yep,
So
yep.
but all right, well, I think we'll probably go ahead and wrap up. Is there anything
Yep.
else that you wanted to share about the Gorham Watchdogs, what you're doing, how to get in touch with you, for people who are in Gorham?
Doge Gorham at gmail.com is an email that tends to be the best. It filters in. We all see that. Check out Gorham Watchdogs on Facebook. GorhamWatchdogs.com is our website. Looking for help, looking for numbers. Share us, like us, and I'm pretty good, Chuck. My business
Yeah.
phone's ringing, so I gotta sign off too, and
All
I'm
right.
sure.
Well,
Sure. So,
if anybody's interested in doing something similar in a different town, I think you'd be open to having people reach out.
uh, absolutely. Yep.
All right. Well,
Perfect.
thank you for coming on, and thank everybody for watching. And again, as we often say on this podcast, your job is to get involved in your local politics, but also you can help by sharing. There are shorts that come out of these. You can go ahead and make sure you like, share, subscribe to all these things. We're on to every platform. Even Lemonade. If you haven't heard of that, I'm still not really sure how to use it, but Lemonade is a new platform. But yeah, go ahead and like, share, subscribe to help people better understand what's going on. And if you want to support the podcast, buy some merch. I'll put the QR code out real quick, or you can go to my X page and there's a link to it there. But you can buy some of the cool merch that we have. We got hats, we got really nice mugs. And there are better hats than these. You'll see me wearing one of those soon as they come in. But yeah, tons of fun merch there, so that you can use it as an opportunity not just to support the podcast, but also start conversation. People are like, "What's the Muddy Waters podcast?" One of the people who bought a sweatshirt had shared that, like, he's had people ask him, like, "What is that?" And so it's been able to have a conversation about engaging in politics and what's really going on in our world. And that's why we do this. So check us out and share. And yeah, thank you all. And we'll see you back here. Actually, I think I'm double duty today. There's a 3:00 podcast with Unquirer, and I think JK London, I think, is going to be on. So check us out then. And we're out for now. Thanks,
Thanks, Chuck. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
You too.